In this video, we will learn few debugging tools available in the VBA for Excel. Even if you are an experienced programmer, when you write a code, you will always find errors and these called bugs. In order of your user to enjoy using your code, you must remove all the bugs and verify that your code is working correctly. There are multiple ways that you can debug your code. The first of all of them is stepping through your code by going line by line and making sure that all the inputs are referenced to the right cells, the logic is complete and correct, and then the output is passed out to the correct cell. For example, I can look at the code that we have here now and I say option explicit requires all variables to be declared. I have declared A as double, B as double, C as single, and E as double. Then I start a sub and I call this sub sum demo. Select sheet 1 and then from sheet 1 I call cell 1 comma 2 means B1 and I assign that to A and I get the value from B2 and I assign this to B and I get the value of C3 B3 and I assign this to C. Then I use worksheet function.sum to find the sum of A, B, and C. Then the last step here, I output the value of E or the sum to cell 5, 2 or B5. So this way here is I'm going through the code step by step and making sure that I execute it in the same correct sequence that the compiler will do. Remembering that VBA will compile and execute the code from top to bottom, left to right, taking in consideration the order of operations. Well, this is a good way when you have a very short code or you have a code in a manageable size. But when you have a code that is long and the logic is a bit complicated, it's not so easy to step through the code with your eyes. Therefore, you will be able to use some of the following tools. The first tool is adding a breakpoint. When you look at the gray bar to the left here, when you click on that bar, you will add what's called a breakpoint. You can add as many breakpoints to your code as you see necessarily, and you can remove these breakpoints by simply clicking on each of these dots on the left hand side. Usually I select a breakpoint, for example, at the end of my input, and once I verify that the input is correct, I remove that breakpoint and then I add another one at the end of the logic. If my logic is very long and complicated, I will add breakpoints and intermediate location within the logic. Again, I am trying to find the bug and I'm not trying to rush to just say that I debugged my code, because at the end of the day, I wanted to find where the error is and I'd be able to correct the error. Once I finish removing all the bugs or the errors from my logic, I remove the breakpoint and I move my attention to the output. Let's try to see how can we do this. So I'm going to put a breakpoint at my logic and then I will run the code. Notice here that once I run the code, whether I run it from the inside or I run it from the button, the code will run through the entire code except this point where it will stop. Let's see what's going to happen. So I'm going to run. You see here the code went through and came to this point and stopped. And somebody says, how would you know it went through? If I take my mouse and I would hover over each of these variables, I will see that the value is already assigned correctly. How would I know that the value is correct? A is coming from B1. If I look at B1, I have the value 3. If I hover over A, it's 3. Therefore, it's correct. I can do the same thing with B. The value is 5. It's coming from B2 with the user input the number 5. Similarly, C is 8, which is the value in B3. Now, notice that the code been executed all the way to E, to where I put my breakpoints, and then calculated what the value of E is, so which is value of A plus B plus C. Now, it did not pass that because where the breakpoint is. In order for you to go to the next point or to continue executing the code, you press F8. Now, what's going to happen, the code will be executed one line at a time till you hit the end. Now I wanted to go to the next line, which is the end sub. I press F8 again. And you see the output is 16, and then I press F8 again, and that will end the code. So what we just saw right now is adding a breakpoint will allow you to stop the code at a certain point, and then you can step through the code using F8 till you get to the end. Another way of doing it is by putting the cursor, by placing your cursor at any point in the code where you want it to be. It could be at A, could be at B, could be at C, and then use F8 to step through the code. Let's see how can we do that. I will stop my cursor at C, and then I will go to debug, and I will say run to cursor. Notice what's going to happen right now. The code will run through A, found the value to be 3, through B, find the value to be 5, and the value of C will have found it to be 8. Now I will press F8 to go through the next step, and then output, and then end sub, and then I will exit out of the code. Now, if I have many variables, hovering over each of the variable might not be the best way to do it. It happened, the VBA allows us to add watches or keep our eyes fixated on one of these variables. Let's say that the variable interest. The way we'll do this, I will add a breakpoint first. Then let's say that the variable of interest is C. I will right click and I will say add watch. And I will say OK. Now when I look, I see I have add watch here at the bottom, and it says C out of context empty, and it says where it is. The reason it says it's out of context and empty because the code is not run yet. Now when I hit run, notice what happened. First of all, the code run all the way to where the breakpoint is and stopped. Then it actually shows me here the value of C. It says the value of C is 8, and it's of a type single, which is what I declared out there. I can actually add another watch for A even when the code is running, and right away I will see what the A is. Similarly, I can add a watch of E, what I can say when I can add the watch and I see what the value of E is. That's one way of looking at what all these values are. Another way, I can look at all the variables in the code by adding the locals window. I can go to view and I say locals window. Notice here that it shows to me module 1 in the locals window, and if I expand module 1, it shows me A, B, C, and E, which are the 4 variables that I'm looking for. All these are just methods of us to debug or keep track of how the code is executing and be able to remove the bugs as I find them one at a time. One word of advice: when you debug, do not get frustrated and read carefully each line. Sometimes the bug is just a misspelling. Sometimes the bug is instead of adding, you multiplied. So read carefully and don't get frustrated.